Greetings peasants, welcome to my review of Robin of Sherwood by Richard Catweazle Carpenter. I'll be your host, the Sheriff of Rottingham. This is a 1984 tie-in with the British TV series of the same name. In this novella, Robin is the last survivor of the razed village of Locksley, who forms a band of outlaws to resist the despotic Sheriff of Nottingham. The TV series that this is based on has a huge reputation, in part due to being a grittier, realer depiction of the many myths based on the story, while at the same time it also moved away from the more medieval settings of takes like Errol Flynn's, for example, to a pre-Christian England. Let's look into the plot, and you can skip this part as usual by sliding the timer to the point indicated on the screen. However, do not consider any part of this review to be spoiler-free. The story begins 100 years or so after the Battle of Hastings, where the wounds of Norman occupation remain fresh and the Saxons resent the Norman lords as occupiers. The Sheriff of Nottingham is one such Norman, ruling with an iron hand in the absence of the king, who is away fighting in the Holy Land. The village of Locksley is razed in the prologue, and Robin is taken to live with local millers. The narrative skips forward a few years, and Robin, now a young man, is captured by the sheriff's gamekeeper, Guy of Gisburne, for hunting deer illegally. He's thrown in prison with, among others, Will Scarlet and Little John. They escape into Sherwood Forest and use the landscape to their advantage to raid the sheriff's various activities. They also have to contend with the demon worshipper with designs on Marion, tetchy Templars, other outlaws, and eventually the returning king. Those familiar with the TV series will realise that basically this slim volume contains the entire first TV series. That's about 6 or 7 hours of television condensed into 156 pages. With that in mind, it's not hard to imagine, I'm sure, that this is a very pacey take on the Robin Hood myth. The upside to that is that it's never ever going to bore anybody. The downside is that it really lays bare the television origins of what you're reading. Though Carpenter doesn't make any explicit show of where one episode begins or ends, it's usually fairly obvious, which makes for a rather one-dimensional and episodic take on the story. When a chapter begins like this: although Robin Hood's band was loved and honoured, there were other outlaws in Sherwood who would murder anyone for a few pennies. Stories of one such savage gang reached Robin and his friends, and one day they set out to find them. Well, it's fairly obvious that it was the beginning of one adventure, quite separate from those that have gone before. Carpenter has adopted brevity as an art form of its own, and the novel gives little indication of the love and honour for Robin's band, nearly zero mention of other outlaws generally, and nothing of this particular group or why they should require Robin's personal intervention over all the other unmentioned outlaws. This is also, as you could tell from the page number, the very last episode of the series, and whereas a novel ought to have built to this point, Carpenter is introducing it in a handful of lines near the end of his novel. Perhaps there was a paper shortage in 1984, but there is a whole series of tie-ins not based on actual episodes that were released in the following years, and this would have been better served with a book this long, perhaps slightly longer, devoted to each of the episodes. By far the greatest casualty of Carpenter's mad dash to the finish line is the famed grittiness of the series. This is one of the most descriptive passages in the entire novel. It was several hours to cock-crow, and the mist hung thickly over Locksley Lake as the battle horses floated silently across it, with their riders standing guard beside them. There was blood on their battered shields. The warriors' faces were grim-set and hawk-like in their helmets. They had their orders. The village and everyone in it were to be destroyed. Now, sparse as that is, it's from the prologue, and in the rest of the text, descriptive passages are virtually non-existent, leaving readers to fill in the imagery based on whatever Robin Hood story comes to mind. Undoubtedly, this is a tie-in. That will likely be the series that it's based on, but a really good tie-in builds on the film or the show while also introducing it, advertising it to less familiar audiences. Marion is introduced like this. Marion was 17 with long auburn hair and dark eyes. She was gentle and intelligent with a delightful sense of fun. This is an early hint that Carpenter has limited his work to taking the TV script and changing it into the past tense. While I have a string of videos on character descriptions, and I'm certainly not asking for much more than this, What I am suggesting is that this is how she was described in the screenplay and Carpenter has just copied it. But also Carpenter doesn't take the time to show that any of this is actually true. There's only one scene where Marion is a genuine participant in action key to the plot. She argues with Robin because he won't let her fight in their raids, and then she storms off. This means that she is absent from the camp when the others are poisoned and able to return and save them. Yet a decent writer, willing to just every now and then let the story breathe, would have remembered that Marion was gentle, intelligent and fun, and written something in that scene that showed either one. She could have play-fought with Robin rather than actually fought with him, or arranged the whole scene as a ruse to trick the newcomer she was suspicious of, or she could have just been kind and gentle enough that the poisoner thought twice. Marion contributes nothing else to the story, but that is still more than most of the band of outlaws. In a 7-hour TV show, an ensemble cast shines, and most of the actors in this series, particularly people like Clive Mantle and Ray Winston, have gone on to have solid careers. But in a 156-page novella, you don't get an ensemble. You get a very one-dimensional Robin and Will, a comedy relief Little John, and everybody else is just a name on a page. The next issue with it is that if you're using your pace to get to your action scenes and leaving the audience breathless and turning the pages for more, then it's working for you. But if your action scenes read like this, Little John leapt down behind 3 men-at-arms and attacked them with his quarterstaff. In a space of a few seconds he had knocked all of them senseless. Well, it's hardly edge-of-the-seat stuff, is it? In fact, if this was a screenplay, I'd expect it to read something like this. Little John, secreted in some trees, leaps down and batters 3 men-at-arms with his quarterstaff. He knocks them senseless in a few seconds and saunters off. And the verbs here are deliberately chosen to show, 1, that this is a deliberate and cunning act by John, 2, that the fight is utterly one-sided, and 3, that he walks away with some bravado or a little cool. Even in a screenplay, the words you use matter. Tell me what this says about anybody involved. Because if it says nothing, and you're desperate to write the shortest take on Robin Hood ever, and maybe even get yourself in the Guinness Book of Records, just cut this out. This is the climax of the story. Robin and Gisborne finally face off in a storeroom where there's only one way in or out and where a fire has started. This is the climax of an adventure that took 7 hours to tell on television. It should be death and glory stuff. This is the scene in its entirety. Above, Gisborne and Robin locked swords and pushed and strained against each other until finally they toppled down the wooden steps and landed in a heap in the middle of the fighting soldiers. Marion jumped into the struggle and tried to put out the fire, but it was spreading rapidly. Gisborne backed against the storeroom door and fought grimly. This time the wolf's head would not escape. He would burn to death in the blazing storeroom. Gisborne no longer cared if he lived or died, as long as he could put an end to the young outlaws who had evaded him so long. The air was thick with smoke and flames were eating their way towards the roof, but still Gisborne kept the outlaws from the door. Robin redoubled his efforts, and suddenly with a cry he ran him through. What a very limp effort that is. Our hero is fighting his nemesis to the death, and 2/3 of the text written about it don't even mention him. Does this up the stakes and have you on the edge of your seat? It can't have you eagerly turning the page to find out what happens, because it doesn't take up more than half a page. Not only that, though Gisborne is one of the more involved characters, he's still a comedic buffoon. He can't represent a genuine threat after what we've seen of him. And this ending, where nothing is happening and then the hero just does a bit more and succeeds, has also been done before. Cutting and slashing, Robin and his companions fought doggedly. The ferocity of the onslaught drove the soldiers back, but others, led by Gisborne, still in his nightshirt, raced out of the castle to help them. Scarlet killed 2 of the guards and hacked down a 3rd, and suddenly the way to freedom was clear. Will Scarlet here, tapping untapped heroics. And surely, when your hero just needs to up his game a bit to succeed, the question becomes, well, why didn't you just do that to begin with? And then that screenplay comes to mind again. Is this what it said in the screenplay before the stunt people got together and choreographed and blocked out all the fighting?
Official first draft. Of course, there's a lot of cheating in there. A lot of they fight.
It's a real shame that there wasn't an attempt to produce a book of the same standard as the TV show, which was clearly a project the cast and crew were hugely invested in. It also tells the story set in a darker era, full of ancient superstition. though I'm not sure that the English were united enough in that period to consider themselves oppressed by a foreign invader, or how accurate the depiction of religion is. The borderline Dark Age setting lends itself to the mysterious, a tension that the show handled really well, but Carpenter here doesn't tackle at all. Likewise, he hints at, especially in the final episode, the duality of Robin as a protector of both the poor and the ultimate oppressor in the form of the king, a darker depiction by far than most, but this aspect just isn't explored as it might have been. I've seen Robin discussed as a communist figurehead, and while there are hints of this when everyone gets an equal share of the redistributed wealth, you also get the sheriff described like this. Like all tyrants, he wanted everyone to be the same, to act and think the same. Everyone else was dangerous. The Robin Hood myth is so multifaceted, so rich with imagery and magic, so open to nuance, that it seems a shame that this novel feels as rushed as it does. The cast of characters are barely worthy of the name. The action is so heavily condensed it borders on embarrassing, and is so lacking in thought and variety that it weakens the breakneck pace of the adventure. I think it's a fundamental misjudgment, because fans of something usually want more of it, not less. A book this length, based on each episode, might have better served both a fanatical audience and the strength of the source material. Nostalgic fans might be better served looking into the other tie-ins, but I'm sure they'll find enough member berries here to get something from it. Sadly, there is nothing here for anyone without those rose-tinted glasses. Many thanks for watching. Liking and subscribing gets you more of this sort of thing.